Good morning or good evening. Welcome, everyone, to the Center for a New American Securities virtual event following the crypto. I am Yaya Fanusi, an adjunct senior fellow here at the CNAS for the program on energy, economics, and security. And today, our program, Following the Crypto, is based on one of the reports that we released a couple of months ago called Following the Crypto, using blockchain analysis to assess the strengths and vulnerabilities of North Korean hackers. Um, Great title, Following the Crypto. I think last year we did a program called Show Me the Crypto. I think maybe our next event should be Give Me the Crypto. All jokes aside, everyone, I'd like to introduce our illustrious speakers for today. First, we have our keynote speaker, Mr. Eric Venton-Voek. He is the coordinator of the panel of experts on the Democratic People's Republic of Korea at the United Nations Security Council and comes from decades of experience working within the UK government in various capacities. We also have as a panelist, thank you, Eric. Great to see you. Welcome.
Morning, Yaya.
Good morning. We also have Jason Bartlett, the author of the Follow the Crypto report. He is a research associate for the Energy, Economics, and Security program here at CNAS. Glad to have him. We also have Nick Carlson, who will speak. He worked alongside Jason to help provide blockchain analysis of the North Korean hackers. He is a blockchain intelligence analyst at TRM Labs. So, Nick, it's great to have you. And also, we have Dr. Dooyeon Kim, who is an expert on the two Koreas and also an adjunct senior fellow for the Indo-Pacific Security Program here at CNAS. Thank you. Welcome to you, to all of you. I think what we'd like to do is really start off with Mr. Venton-Voek. I'd like to turn it over to you to maybe frame the situation for us with your great experience and insight. We're looking forward to hear from you after we hear your opening remarks, and then we'll hear from the rest of our panelists. Thank you.
Great. Yeah, thank you very much. It's a great pleasure to be able to speak to you all this morning. I'm Eric Venton-Voek. I'm the coordinator of the UN's panel of experts on DPRK. Since 2008, our task has been to monitor sanctions implementation and report to the UN Security Council twice annually with our findings and recommendations. I'm sure you are all avid readers of our product. I've been asked to say a few words by way of introduction to a more informed discussion of the issues raised in the paper. I'll talk a little about the panel's work and then focus on the centrality of cybercrime to the achievement of DPRK's weapons of mass destruction objectives. As you all know, the regime, the sanctions regime as a whole, was a unanimous response to the by the Security Council to DPRK's weapons of mass destruction programs. It's the widest regime of sanctions ever imposed by the UN on a nation state, and the regime has developed considerably over the years. Our reports have similarly changed over the years as well. We used to report a lot on DPRK arms sales, counterfeiting, the supply of luxury goods to DPRK's elites. For several years, more recently, we focused on maritime sanctions evasion, the illicit supplies of oil products and the sale of coal, and the complexity of the networks behind that maritime trade, as well as revenue generation from overseas forced labor, construction projects, sales of art, and the list goes on and on. Fundamentally, DPRK's ability to continue to develop its WMD depends on three things: know-how, specialized equipment and products, and fundamentally, money. The panel has shown in its recent reports how know-how can be obtained from joint scientific research, which is explicitly banned by the sanctions regime, but which nevertheless continues. It can also be obtained through old-fashioned espionage and via cyber means. DPRK's indigenous scientific industries should not be underestimated, but some specialized items and chemicals required in developing WMD need to be sourced from overseas, and our reports demonstrate that DPRK has a sophisticated global network of trade representatives with diplomatic status who procure these materials. But fundamental to this procurement network is money, and DPRK is an innovator in finding new sources of illicit income. It's true that not all of this income is intended for the development of WMD. Kim Jong-un and his elite enjoy an extravagant lifestyle, even during a global pandemic. You'll be aware of high-profile and lavish new construction projects in DPRK as well. But illicit income is emphatically not obtained with the wider economic interests of the DPRK population in mind. It's fundamentally designed to develop its WMD. And without cash, DPRK's WMD program would slow dramatically. The sanctions regime recognizes this, and there are strict restrictions on DPRK banking representatives globally and the provision of traditional financial services to DPRK entities. But even with these provisions, there's been a marked acceleration recently, as you'll no doubt be aware, in DPRK missile testing, particularly over the last 6 months. It may be no coincidence that the words cyber and cryptocurrency do not actually appear in the UN sanctions resolutions. Over the past several years, it's increasingly the case that cyber-enabled financial crime, first against the SWIFT network and the more poorly regulated traditional financial institutions, and then increasingly since about 2017 against a variety of sources of cryptocurrencies, has become a fundamental part of DPRK's sanctions evasion framework, enabling their WMD programs to continue to develop. This CNAS report that we're here to discuss identifies DPRK hackers' evolving methodologies in cryptocurrency crime. And make no mistake, DPRK hackers are really good. It's a very low cost and low risk means of stealing money. And they're right on the cutting edge of cyber techniques, as you may have seen in the most recent hack of the Axie Infinity video game. Although attribution is sometimes difficult, DPRK hackers don't really care if they get caught. By then, it's too late and they've moved on. I would note in passing that there remain some very open questions in the laundering of stolen cryptocurrencies, in the transfer from cryptocurrencies to fiat currencies, and in the central coordination of the subsequent use by DPRK of those stolen funds. There's still a lot we don't know. The panel's reports really ought to focus on the most important means of sanctions evasion. I personally believe that for some years, cyber activity has been absolutely fundamental to DPRK's ability to evade UN sanctions. But it's true, I'm afraid, that our reports have not really reflected this central importance of cyber crime. One reason for this is because people don't tend to tell us about cyber issues. We rely on UN member states to inform us about breaches in order to investigate them. But many member states are quite cautious about their own cyber capabilities. Victims, for their part, are often very reluctant to discuss how hacks happened and how extensive they were. And the panel is working increasingly closely with academics, researchers, journalists, and the cybersecurity industry to inform our own investigations. I do hope and expect that our reports in the future will rather better reflect the central importance of cyber-enabled financial crime to the DPRK. Following the crypto report adds usefully to wider awareness of these issues. The sooner that DPRK methodologies can be exposed and understood, the sooner action can be taken by the cryptocurrency exchanges, games manufacturers, cryptocurrency users themselves to protect themselves, and at a government level, critically, in regulating this new world. No one in this audience needs to be reminded that blockchain technology was designed to be transparent. Although innovative decentralized finance technologies continue to make that harder and harder, as Nick will say, it remains the case that blockchain analysis will be a central tool in following the money, and that remains fundamental to any investigator watching bad guys. It's my view that the international community needs to work out a way to harness the dynamic creativity and innovation that characterizes cryptocurrencies and the broader applications of blockchain technology, whilst doing so securely and in a regulated way. I do recognize the inherent contradiction in that statement, and it will take time and imagination, I think, to work that through. But at present, it's too easy and low risk for Lazarus and others to exploit the cutting edge of new financial technologies in order to steal funds. And there are very few worse examples of the dangers in rogue regimes having access to money than DPRK. Thanks.
Thank you, Eric. Very insightful words to really sort of tee up our conversation. And I actually want to let the audience know that they can be involved. We actually welcome questions throughout the event from the audience. And the way to do that is you can submit your questions. You should see the URL page right there at our event webpage at cnas.org/live. So you can go there and you'll find a place to submit a question, or you can tweet at hashtag CNAS 2022. So I want to put that out there for the audience. We will look at those questions throughout the time, and then towards the end, we'll get a chance to hopefully convey those to our speakers. So I'd like to turn to our speakers, starting with Jason, who again is the author of the Follow the Crypto report. Jason, I'd like to hand it over to you.
Great. Thank you, Yaya, and thank you, Eric, for those opening remarks. We're very honored to have you join us here today. So as Eric outlined, this report provides in-depth analysis of North Korea's demonstrated ability to exploit financial technologies, in particular cryptocurrencies and blockchain technology, to procure funds for its illicit nuclear and ballistic weapons development programs. Our research was supported through blockchain intelligence analysis conducted in partnership with TRM Labs, or more specifically, NIC, and involved 3 case studies of major North Korean hacks conducted in 2018, 2019, and 2020. According to our research, after gaining access to the networks of targeted cryptocurrency exchanges, North Korean operatives rapidly worked to steal as much crypto as possible. However, they refrained from allocating that same level of resources and effort into long-term obfuscation practices, signaling minimal concern over eventual attribution and legal recourse for their actions, something that Eric highlighted in his opening remarks. Typically, most cyber criminals try to remain hidden for as long as possible and will use certain techniques to hide their identities, sometimes even paying a certain fee in order to do so. But from our research, North Korean hackers prefer to use just enough resources to conceal their initial activity to stay under the radar during the hack, while laundering the stolen funds as quickly as possible. So this seems to be a preference for speed and quantity over long-term protection of identity. And this is likely a result of US and global law enforcement having a lot of difficulty actually arresting and charging North Korean hackers for their crimes. It's very difficult to have a North Korean hacker extradited to the United States because Pyongyang certainly won't do so. And traditional allies of North Korea, which have a history of hosting North Korean hackers within their jurisdiction, such as China, are not typically helpful to US investigators and law enforcement. There are several cases of North Korean operatives being successfully apprehended by US law enforcement, but there is certainly an exemption to the status quo, and this enforcement issue is likely a major driving force in Pyongyang's lack of long-term ossification efforts when stealing crypto. Additionally, third-player actors, we've noticed, also play a very significant role in supporting North Korean cybercrime, as virtually all of North Korea is cut off from the US financial system, including the US dollar, meaning that Pyongyang relies on foreign nationals from other countries to help launder and liquidate stolen crypto into hard currency or fiat currency for them. Traditionally, Pyongyang has received assistance from Chinese cybercriminals to help launder stolen crypto, as seen in one of the hacks analyzed for this report, where 2 Chinese nationals helped launder over $100 million worth of crypto on behalf of North Korea. But it's also important to note that Pyongyang's list of those willing to help evade sanctions on its behalf certainly extend just beyond cybercriminals in China. Another important takeaway from our report is that we've noticed that the rate by which cryptocurrency and financial technologies evolve continues to far outpace the rate by which national governments and international institutions are able to regulate and understand them. And this is a major vulnerability that North Korean hackers continue to exploit. Compared to the first hack analyzed in this report that occurred in 2018, the Lazarus Group, which is one of North Korea's leading hacking intelligence organizations, used significantly more advanced techniques for the second hack in 2019, such as a professional cryptocurrency mixer, and in 2020 used a new decentralized finance or DeFi platform to help launder funds. I'm sure my colleague Nick will elaborate further during his remarks, but North Korea will likely continue to use these new and evolving financial technologies as they remain heavily vulnerable and unregulated compared to more traditional forms of finance. The third major takeaway from our report was that the majority of North Korean-led cyber attacks targeting cryptocurrency exchanges start with some form of an email phishing campaign that does not typically target individual crypto users, but actually the employees and network system of the cryptocurrency exchange itself. And this highlights the need for responsible organizations to require all their employees to adopt stricter cyber hygiene protocols, because in some cases, it only takes one employee to simply click on an affected link for a North Korean hacker to gain control of the entire network system. However, it's not all gloom and doom, as our report does include many policy recommendations that the US government and like-minded nations can adopt in order to strengthen their resilience against rising North Korean cybercrime. I'm just going to mention my top picks for now. So in terms of US domestic policy, we recommend in the report that the executive branch should designate specific research on state-sponsored cybercrime groups, such as North Korea's Lazarus Group, within the new National Cryptocurrency Enforcement Team that was created last year, especially since North Korea has successfully stolen and laundered hundreds of millions of dollars in cryptocurrency for years now. For U.S. foreign policymakers, we recommend that Washington should include specific joint research and investigative initiatives on cryptocurrency-related illicit cyber activity within its proposed cyber working group with South Korea. Although Washington and Seoul pledged back in May 2021 to create a bilateral cyber working group for enhanced cyber and law enforcement cooperation, this agreement failed to have any mention of cryptocurrency or financial technology. And this subject loophole should be addressed to maximize joint efforts between Washington and Seoul to enhance cooperation on these issues, as both countries offer unique advantages towards countering North Korean-led cyber-enabled financial crime. Another important decision is for the U.S. Department of Treasury to expand designations on any individual or entity supporting and or facilitating North Korean cybercrime. And this would include foreign OTC brokers or over-the-counter brokers that help launder funds from North Korea, as well as telecommunication companies that provide North Korea with technical services, know-how, and equipment that North Korean hackers use to conduct these malicious cyber operations. There is well-documented evidence that certain Chinese and Russian telecommunication companies continue to offer North Korea communication lines that contribute to Pyongyang's ability to launch sustained cyber attacks and intrusions. And as ordinary North Koreans can only access the country's intranet, known as the Kwangmyeong, the sanctioning of foreign telecommunication companies that offer connections to the internet for hackers will most likely not impact the daily lives of the average population. And pending a proper investigation, the Treasury can issue these designations using several existing sanction programs that the Treasury has already used to target North Korean cyber activity, such as DPRK3, Cyber2, and CATSA. And there's many more recommendations I could mention, but I'll end my remarks with that. And I'll throw it back to you, Yaya. Thanks.
Thank you, Jason. That's really, again, also very insightful. And I think we want to jump into Nick. Nick, we'd like to turn to you for a discussion on, how did you follow the crypto?
Yeah, I mean, I think looking at North Korean hacks, just generally as they happen, right, you probably won't go wrong just to generally bet that it's a North Korean hack when something happens. I would guess that overall it's more than 50% of major crypto hacks are North Korea. When you peel back the onion, there's kind of two main paths to figure that out for sure. Malware analysis is the gold standard. I mean, if you can get access to the actual payload that was used to exploit the target, that's a great way to figure out it's North Korea. But my side of the aisle, there's a lot of information on chain. These blockchains, especially with the proliferation of side chains, stuff like Avalanche and Polygon and Terra, Tron. There's a lot of records, telltale signs that are left by these hackers that you can connect them together. And oftentimes, these hacks will be daisy chained on the back end when you track those records on the blockchain. Telltale signs in North Korea. I think speed is almost always. There's many cases where, non-North Korean hacks, the hacker clearly sometimes exceeds their own plan, right? They gain access sooner than they thought they would. They don't know what they're doing with the assets. It takes them time to figure out how to launder them. With the North Koreans, it's almost always from the gate, once they have the asset, they are laundering it immediately. The efficiency of that operation, right? The systematized processes that they use, North Koreans are usually very consistent. It's going to be the same technique over and over and over again to get those funds laundered and used. I think, talking earlier, how does this differ from state-sponsored activity from places like Russia and China? And it really is like a completely different order of magnitude, I think. In places like Russia, China, you have malign neglect sometimes, a willingness to allow bad actors to kind of run free. This is the state, though, right? I mean, this is the government in North Korea that's doing this. It's basically the modern day equivalent of the Barbary pirates. This is a country that is engaged in bank robbery, state-sponsored bank robbery. It's not traditional espionage. It's not theft of trade secrets. This is not Monsanto's new genetically modified corn, right? This is hundreds of millions of dollars that are being used to support weapons programs and destabilizing activities. It's just a completely unique, singular target.
Important point there, Nick, about the uniqueness of North Korea as an actor, and I think it makes sense for us to turn to Dr. Kim to get at some insight into the policy landscape here. The end game for not only for North Korea, but the response from South Korea and other nations. So I'd like to turn it to you, Dr. Kim.
Sure, thanks. So this is a fascinating report and panel to me because I mainly work on North Korea's nuclear weapons development and policies towards North Korea and both Koreas actually. But to answer your question, before we can talk about the end game, because I think that's highly speculative for now to see to actually know for sure with any degree of certainty what their end game is. But I think they've shown us enough data points and indicators to suggest what their objectives are. And so we've heard reportedly that Kim Jong-un has said that, quote, cyber warfare along with nuclear weapons and missiles is an all-purpose sword or omnipotent sword, regarding how you want to translate the Korean word of 만능보감. And, and he said that this all-purpose sword guarantees our military's capability to strike relentlessly. Now, this was according to, back in 2013, even, South Korea's intelligence chief during a South Korean National Assembly audit hearing. Now, this comment reportedly by Kim Jong-un, plus North Korea's cyber attacks, bank heists, and cryptocurrency laundering activities, they all suggest that its cyber capability is integral to their survival in general. So in other words, to make money and demonstrate power without the risk of receiving direct retaliation. So cyber has these dual purposes. Now, on the money-making side, we have seen an increasing number of reports during Kim Jong-un's rule, especially of cyber crimes that are financially motivated. And Jason has done an excellent job of drilling down into several case studies there. And they suggest it's a key way for them to support the regime, especially with sanctions and during North Korea's self-isolation because of the pandemic. Now, on the power projection side, cyber operations are relatively low cost, high effective tool compared to procuring and maintaining conventional and nuclear military capabilities. Now, although we've also seen reports that the money that they make through cyber is to finance its nuclear weapons development and economy. And so we've seen these reports, especially footnoted and revealed through the UN panel of experts reports and other news reports. But North Korea may see cyber as a weapon to their advantage because North Korea's reliance on the internet is very limited, whereas the US and South Korea is highly dependent on their networks, which become weak points for cyber offenders like North Korea. Now, offensive cyber capabilities operations help them exercise national power, as I mentioned, with relatively low risk of escalation and retaliation. So, in this sense, cyber has become a not only cost-effective, but asymmetric and deniable tool based because they can evade attribution and exercise power over and even coercion toward the United States and South Korea without having to fire any missiles or even bullets. Now, I do want to very briefly mention a little bit of history because this dates back to before Kim Jong-un's time. It goes back to his father, Kim Jong-il's time, and a prominent North Korean defector who taught computer science in North Korea has said that North Korea's military heavily integrates information warfare into contemporary warfighting plans. And, like I mentioned, this was his father's, an interest of his father. And back in 2010, according to that same defector, apparently his father, Kim Jong-il, at the time had said, quote, that modern warfare has changed from oil to from war of oil and bullets to now of information war. But no one was injured, and imperialism was forced into a corner with one blow. And Kim Jong-il, his father, apparently said that the intelligence force, along with nuclear weapons, is his quote unquote guts and reserve force. So, I think this really, it's not a new phenomenon. Certainly we've seen during Kim Jong-un's rule, they've ramped up and they've, clearly increased and advanced their nuclear, their cyber capabilities. But there are roots to his father, and I think they have quietly been growing that threat under the radar. And sometimes, several of our colleagues on this panel have already mentioned that this actually is not under many people's radars. Those of you working hard on this are fully aware of what's going on. But from a policy perspective around the world, I think most of the focus has really been on nuclear and on missiles, and comparatively less so in the cyber crime realm. And this is really an area where a lot of your good work and the light really needs to shine.
Thank you, Dion. And this is great. I think hopefully this panel is shining that light on this topic, and I think we can continue. Actually, we have a good amount of time to engage with the audience. I think some questions are going to come in. I have some questions in the back of my mind, but I want to get to the audience. For all of the speakers, here is a question that we have from John. And this is maybe a little bit technical, but let's see where this goes. John is asking, will stablecoins become primary targets for hacking groups, given their goal of stablecoins to be backed by reserve assets like dollars? So stablecoins different from regular cryptocurrencies. Stablecoins, again, are pegged or attached to a real world value. And I want to put that out there to any of you. Nick, perhaps you may want to touch on that.
Yeah, sure. The quick answer, at least right now, is no. The two large stable coins that are out there trading right now, USDT and USDC, those are both issued and controlled by centralized entities, Circle and Tether. And both can be frozen, right? These assets can be seized and liquidated, essentially, if you try to keep those assets as they are. And so what you see every time those assets are stolen is hackers swap them immediately. And this was really kind of precipitated last summer. There was a major hack called the Poly Network. It was also a $600 million plus hack. And the hacker over and over again tried to move some of the stolen Tether and couldn't until somebody tipped him off, hey, look, Tether already froze this. You can't move it. So no, for the moment, no. But on the horizon, there are these class of stable coins called algorithmic stable coins. And these are tied to not like US dollar reserves, but other cryptocurrencies, extremely complicated stuff that I frankly don't understand. But those are, fully decentralized. They're not controlled by individuals. And so those maybe will be much more lucrative and appealing, especially to, say a North Korean hacking team. They can't liquidate, $500 million in a reasonable period of time, and they want to ensure that they don't lose value. Something like one of those algorithmic coins might be more appealing to them.
Well, Nick, I mean, as you just sort of alluded to, the crypto space is evolving fast. And I have a question myself. We don't need to go into details about the Virgil Griffith case. People may know Virgil Griffith was a blockchain developer, and he, recently, I think, was sentenced for his role in terms of trying to provide information to North Korea. But on a related note, I'm aware that even in the broader crypto space, there is still an idea where many people think that, well, maybe the North Korean people should have more access to crypto, because if crypto was more accessible in North Korea, it would allow them, people do think this, it would maybe allow them to, to be more independent from the regime. Let's take the opportunity to get your responses from the audience to that, because I know that there are people in the crypto space that still think that, Virgil Griffith, his conviction notwithstanding. Anyone want to take that? I saw people nodding some of you nodding your heads.
Sure, I can take
shaking your heads.
I can take the first crack. I mean, from a policy perspective, if we look at policy, meaning a comprehensive, holistic approach policy vis-a-vis North Korea, it's very difficult to imagine that it would actually lead to the kind of result that the questioner is hoping for. And I would, imagine a scenario in which because it's such a heavily controlled country by the regime, it's the regime that will either be siphoning off or controlling all that money, and hoarding all that money, and they would not allow the normal North Korean people to have access to that space. Just like, they have apparently an intranet, but the regime controls and does not allow average North Koreans to have access to the outside world, to the internet, for example. And they have cell phones. Cell phones are a dime a dozen, apparently. I just heard today in a group from a former North Korean defector that there are so many cell phones in North Korea now, but it does not mean that the average North Korean has access to the web like the rest of us in the outside world. So that's a short answer to that question.
Thoughts from anyone else want to jump in on that?
Yeah, I would say super exciting, potential developments, right, of Starlink, right, and the ability to provide internet. That's not now, right, but maybe in 5 years, 10 years, there will be this ability to undermine the regime through widespread access to internet through technologies like that. And maybe at that point, crypto can play a role in helping undermine the regime.
Interesting. Eric, you had some thoughts?
Yes, they verge slightly into a really heavily politicized area of sanctions implementation. So I need to be careful. But fundamentally, the sanctions are explicitly designed not to have an effect on the DPRK population in terms of their humanitarian well-being. And I kind of applaud the thinking behind the idea of trying to help your standard DPRK citizen in the terrible position in which they find themselves. And I guess in some sort of weird ideal world, giving them access to cryptocurrency might be a means of helping them out. But of course, this is the real world, and the DPRK regime, as soon as that is enabled, will simply exploit it. The aim is praiseworthy, I think, but actually in practice, it would be disastrous. It would simply mean more money going into the wrong coffers.
Great point. Great point. And, I think in Dr. Kim, in your talk, you sort of ended on the importance of cyber as an area that needs more focus. We actually have a question that may relate from the audience, from Jenny. Jenny's question is, how can the United States establish and uphold legitimate international regulations for cybercrimes? And perhaps more importantly, how can it ensure other states buy into those regulations as well? So I think a question here about just the state of cyber regulations. Any thoughts from Dr. Kim or from others on this question?
So, I would defer to my colleagues on the technical aspects on how to do that. Because again, I focus more on security and politics and policies and sanctions regarding those areas. But certainly, I think because of North Korea's, not only because of North Korea's sanctions evasion tactics, but we have seen countless reports showing that their cyber crimes and operations are helping to finance North Korea's nuclear weapons development. So if that's not only, I think that's a good reason to implement the actual question that you're asking. And it also, I think if we bring this to the present tense, North Korea has closed their own borders and gone into self-isolation because of the pandemic. And so traditional sanctions have been either difficult or impossible to implement to try to curb their nuclear weapons development. And so this is an area where I try to say as much as possible, whether it's in my work, my own work, or in private conversations, that policymakers around the world should focus on find a way to sanction North Korea's cyber crimes and entities and actors that are affiliated and associated with them. As difficult, I'm sure, as that may be on the technological side, but to find a way to work together as an international community to do that, because they are basically breaking many laws here and doing basically bad things that they're not supposed to do. And by the way, because again, I have to underscore that it is believed that these activities are geared to finance North Korea's nuclear weapons development.
Very good. And this makes me think about a question. There are some other questions from the audience, but I want to ask a question which may be speculative in terms of responses, but I think sometimes it's okay to ask speculative questions. I know we're talking about North Korea. I'm going to mention Russia came up a little bit. Given that Russia has taken up so much of the foreign policy oxygen in the room, right, for many folks, given what we've seen with the sanctions response to the Russian invasion, I know we're not Russia experts, but do we think that there may be lessons learned on the North Korea side, whether they are positive or negative, about what is happening now with sanctions on Russia, or have certain either strengths or maybe even vulnerabilities been revealed, or do you think the landscape has changed at all from the North Korea side because of what's happening with Russia, or no difference?
I can jump in and give a quick comment on that. So in terms of crypto, I think that the North Korea case provides a lot of insight into possible security implications regarding Russia and crypto in terms of really trying to calibrate the differences. So I think that a lot of the concern that surrounded Russia state actors possibly using crypto as a way to kind of curb the impact of economic sanctions was basically highlighted from a lot of efforts that the US government has been trying to do to try to crack down on illicit cybercrime targeting crypto, especially from North Korea. However, it's important to calibrate the differences between the two countries. So the Russian economy is significantly larger than the North Korean economy. So North Korea being able to support the majority or a large portion of its new recent revenue for developing its nuclear weapons from crypto hacks is not comparable to Russia being able to support its own economy with crypto. So I think understanding the risks that are around crypto, but also how they correlate to different countries is also really important, because there definitely is a concern for any illicit actor, whether they're Russian, Chinese, Iranian, North Korean, to use crypto as a way to evade sanctions. And that is a very legitimate issue when it comes to Russia as well. However, there was kind of this blow up of over concern over crypto being the solution that Russia will use, whereas the current cryptocurrency industry cannot support an economy like Russia. So I think those are some interesting cases that we can draw from North Korea, is that this will most likely be a possible avenue for many countries to evade sanctions, but it's also important to know exactly what the practicality will be. So I think there are also a lot of other lessons that we can learn, especially when it comes to sanctions enforcement and seizures. So in the past, U.S. government has kind of played with the idea of possibly using seized North Korean assets to try to use those or liquidate those funds to go to victims of the North Korean regime, for example, Otto Warmbier and his family. And there's cases of U.S. government trying to use seized funds either from hacks to return them to the victims of North Korean hacks or North Korean ships, vessels that are seized for engaging in illicit maritime activity. And we're already seeing this conversation happen for Russia, Ukraine. It is a very different situation. But there are already conversations both in Washington, D.C. as well within the U.S. government about whether or not seized Russian assets can be kind of used in a possible reconstruction of Ukraine. It's still in very nascent stages in terms of formulating how that might happen. But this is kind of a clear indication that there are a lot of policymakers that are trying to use the case of North Korea to apply to the current situation in Ukraine.
You know, I see there are a couple of questions coming in or that have come in that I want to combine. I mean, one from Emma asking about how should private sector actors respond to and prevent attacks. We also got an email from Alex asking about how how the U.S. government could protect or should help protect NGOs and academic researchers, which are reportedly being targeted by the DPRK. So this is sort of a dual question, which I guess is, we're talking a lot about governments, but how about the private sector, the think tank community, the NGO community? What needs to happen either with them or even with support to them? If anyone would like to address that, or is that being covered? I mean, and I think about how much does this trickle down, I guess, is a question, right? I mean, and particularly from the UN. I mean, I would ask Eric from the UN panel side, is there a sufficient sort of flow from what you all are seeing and doing and recommending, and how how private sector actors are addressing it?
It's a good question. I actually suspect I don't know the technical detail behind this. I'll tell you straight off. But the panel is hacked all the time. We get daily streams of emails from people who are probably in Pyongyang. They really don't like us. And I would say that actually the fundamental defense against this is basic sort of IP hygiene. We do not open emails from people we don't know, and particularly from those who are not using their sort of institutional email addresses that we can check. We don't click on links. We don't, all the basic things that people have been saying for a very long time, which Jason has already mentioned, is the fundamental first step of a lot of this DPRK activity is spear phishing and impersonating sort of social engineering stuff that every individual should be able to at least have some basic idea of. What I would say from what the panel has seen in cyber activity, and I would stress that we only look at cyber activity that's breaking sanctions. We don't have a mandate to look at the broader cyber espionage or cyber warfare that Dr. Kim was talking about. There's nothing in the sanctions resolutions that forbids that, so we don't look at it. But we just look at sanctions evasion. But we see that DPRK cyber actors always go for the weakest point. They look at non-regulated areas. They look at really interesting and very grey new areas of cryptocurrency, because actually, A, no one really understands them, and B, they can exploit weakness. If you're as strong as you can be, that's probably strong enough. If you're cautious, you're probably doing enough in your NGO or your academic institution. If you're just thinking before you open an email, you're probably doing enough. I mean, I don't want to sound sort of too relaxed about this, but I do think that that DPRK hackers go after weaknesses, not strength.
And that, go ahead, sorry.
So one thing that I would just add is, I mean, quite frankly, for those of us who work in the North Korea space, whether it's on North Korea cyber or just any North Korea related, especially the security and the nuclear side and the political side, you're not really, everyone has been hacked, or phishing attempts have happened to everybody. So you're not really considered an expert if you haven't been hacked before, basically, or attempted. But I will be frank, there is no, I guess, uniform or no guidebook or template that is distributed across all researchers and think tanks and academic institutions to follow to help protect ourselves. And so it's really either you try to learn on your own how to protect yourself and others, or you ask around to other colleagues and friends who have experience. And a lot of times it's really, frankly, a guessing game. I mean, of course, Eric mentioned, just you need to think, of course, yes. But sometimes if you're a new researcher or a new academic in this space and you really don't know all the ins and outs or the basics of cyber or just emails, you can see an email from someone but nowadays we have to expand upon and really read the email address to see if it's a correct email address, or if there's like a strange letter in between, their name or something. And so, I've had experiences where funders would be gracious and very, smart to try to protect their own grantees and send out manuals and guidance on how to protect your servers and your emails and your computers. But again, the short answer really is there is no real guidebook that either the government side or any real place provides for anyone working in this space. And that's something that, best practices, and being up to date. And this is where I really think it's important to team up with the private sector who know how to do all this on the technical side, to really educate academics and researchers on best practices too.
Go ahead, Jason.
Yeah, if I might also jump in. So just adding to that, I think it's a really important message that we've all mentioned on this panel, but I really want to highlight is that the overwhelming majority of North Korean cyber attacks, one, are financially motivated, and two, use email phishing schemes. So that is their main way to get into government servers, to get into cryptocurrency servers, to get into traditional bank systems and other networks, is through emails. North Korean operatives are very talented at making malware, making virus programs that are software that can be attached in emails and documents. North Koreans have even been able to create malware that can go into video games that are being played in South Korea and across the world. They're really good at especially targeting Microsoft operation systems. So they're very, very, very smart. So North Korea's lack of access to hardware skills and Macs and other advanced laptops has nothing to do with their ability to create incredibly devastating software and malware that then they just reuse and repurpose. One of the malware that they even used to target the US and the UK was actually an exploit that was a US government exploit. So North Koreans are very, very talented in what they're doing. And they rely exactly what Eric mentioned on human error, on those little mistakes, just clicking that link. So really having strong cyber hygiene is important, but that's a really general term. Something that we do at CNAS is we actually have one of our staff members sends around about maybe bi-monthly a fake email phishing or a fake email that doesn't have any malicious material in it at all, but it is one that he sends out. And if you click on a link or if you download something, then he's aware of it. And then you're required to kind of take more cyber hygiene training. So that's one practice that I encourage every single NGO, especially that works on North Korea, to do. It's very simple. You can have someone from your HR team just, look up on even Google Images what looks like an email phishing campaign, and you can just send it out to employees. I know a lot of US government and other NGOs do it, but I encourage every cryptocurrency exchange, every researcher that works in a team of more than one person that works on North Korea should adopt these at least quarterly testing systems, because they're incredibly important, because it only takes one mistake and it can cause some very serious damage. So that's kind of one. It seems pretty rudimentary, but it is effective. And it's one way that can help educate yourself as well as your team, and really how to improve your cyber hygiene and try to reduce that human error potential as much as possible. There will always be a risk because we're humans, we always make mistakes, but it's really important to understand what are some of the flags can be, and the best way is trial and errors by doing many different type of test runs within your company.
Very important. Yes, Jason. No one wants to go to the cyber hygiene principal's office and get cyber hygiene detention at CNAS. So that I think that's a great method. There's a question here from a doctor that we got from Dr. Barbarossa, and Nick, you may want to respond to this. Dr. Barbarossa is asking, what kinds of threats do bad virtual asset service providers pose, and what can be done? So, for example, what is stopping DPRK or other bad actors from becoming shadow investors in a loosely regulated, exchange, basically? Do you have thoughts about this?
Yeah, I mean, I think like a lot of these issues, right, the kind of the emerging issue here is not so much traditional centralized exchanges. It's a fairly well-established industry, right? That has, a decent amount of supervision, fairly transparent regulatory structure. What's much more concerning to me is this DeFi space, especially a lot of these side chains that have very lucrative staking options. What I think is going to be happening in the future is a lot of these stolen funds, and we've seen some of this already with North Korea. They are going to be moving them to these blockchains, becoming the validators on those blockchains, and actually earning money from the stolen assets while they, build the time to launder them, convert them to fiat. So what can be done if one of these new decentralized protocols has 30% of its validators, are North Korean hackers? What can be done about that? There's not very much, and it's definitely something that I think is going to happen at some point, probably quite soon. But there is no easy answer.
Absolutely, it's a very, very tough challenge. We do have a couple more questions, and I'll go through them, and we can see which ones we can maybe shed light on. Actually, there was from June asked about international collaboration, international community collaborating, and as Eric I think mentioned, right? We're talking about sanctions. UN panel is focused on sanctions, but our conversation here has been about other things, other activities that may not be related to sanctions, possibly. So I think this question is, can you speak? What are the interventions or collaborative efforts beyond sanctions that we are seeing that could address some of the problems with North Korea? Do there need to be more, or are we doing enough in terms of international collaboration outside of sanctions? Any thoughts there?
I can jump in just very quickly, maybe just one line. I think one area, not just from the US side, but I think also from the UN international community, is to really make sure that we are having a strong presence in regions where North Korea is also present. So we will most likely not be able to have a strong kind of cybersecurity protocol presence in China or Russia, but in Southeast Asia, where a very large number of North Korean cyber activity is allegedly occurring, is something that's very, very important, because the Southeast Asia region, unfortunately, does not have a very robust cyber security infrastructure, but it is very robust in terms of its connection to the crypto industry, as well as individual users of crypto. And it is a global international hub for finance, as well as international crime. So that's one reason why really trying to strengthen, whether it's bilateral or multilateral relations or other type of partnerships that are happening between the US and other governments in Southeast Asia, is a really important area where I think there should be more attention. But I think for the rest, I'll turn to the rest of the panel for their input.
Yeah, I would obviously international cooperation on something as generally poorly understood as cyber is quite difficult. There's not international agreement on cyberspace, and so finding international agreement on regulation of cyberspace is even more unlikely. But what can be, I think, what is valuable is individual bilateral work. Jason mentioned the work that the US and ROK are doing together in this space. I think what is required is some best practice, particularly by people who clearly know what they're doing. And the US and ROK on this particular issue probably know more than anybody. So if they can work out how to work together and then publicize that action and those decisions, then other countries can probably learn from it. I would also mention in passing the Financial Action Task Force, which is a Paris-based organization, which is, it comes up with an awful lot of very, very powerful, they're quite stodgy reading, their recommendations, but for those involved in finance, they're absolutely essential. And their recommendations that the international community are asked to follow, and members of FATF are asked to follow those financial implementations in order to maintain best practice. And I think they've done quite a lot of work on cryptocurrency. The trouble is implementing those things. As I can say only too clearly, any regime, it depends on the quality of its implementation in order for its effectiveness. And so, countries need to implement what experts suggest.
Hmm. And, speaking about just crypto, I think earlier we mentioned the Axie Infinity game hack, the crypto game hack. And this is a new, and maybe the audience may not know that the online crypto game, something called play to earn crypto, this is sort of a new phenomenon, a new trend. And the Axie Infinity hack, was really what $600 million worth of crypto stolen. So huge hack with a new phenomenon of crypto games. Brian is asking about Jason's report, which highlights the online crypto games. Brian is asking, what steps should policymakers take to address those concerns, the concerns of these new niche elements of the crypto space, like crypto pay-to-earn games? Any thoughts there? Is this something that's being tracked? Nick, I'm wondering if even within the blockchain analysis world, are you all sort of distinguishing between crypto games versus other entities?
Yeah, no, I don't want to step on Jason here, but yeah, the assets are the same, right? This was Ethereum that was stolen, USDC, I think also. It's the same whether it's stolen from a game or from an exchange or from a DeFi protocol. I think it's the youth of this industry, right? A couple years ago, we were on the cusp of the end of the era of the centralized exchange hack, right? As these companies became more mature, they had real cybersecurity policies in place. They had mature policies to control crypto assets and their cold storage wallets, things like that. The moment of opportunity to make massive thefts in that sphere had evaporated or was getting much smaller. And now you have the emergence of DeFi, you have the emergence of these games. It's just this cycle that there is no way to short circuit this, right? Until these companies are mature and recognize the threat that they face and pay the money that's needed to secure their own infrastructure, this is just going to keep happening. And I don't think there is any silver bullet here. It's just a matter of more of these hacks happen, more people lose these assets, and people desperately seek to hire the talent they need to secure their assets.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
And I
Go
think
ahead, Jason.
just quickly to add to that, I agree with everything that Nick said. I think we're just going to see more and more of this happening. Sanctions aren't going anywhere, and neither is crypto, and neither are North Korean hackers. So these are going to be issues that I'm sure we're going to see continue down the line. And I think it's very difficult to crack down or curb activity that is not well understood. And I think crypto in general is not well understood by people that have the authority to maybe go after it, because it is new and emerging. It's not new in terms of time, but it's new in terms of how we're seeing it so widely adopted and so widely used for so many different activities, both illicit and illicit. Even in the terms of video games, typically video games, it's siloed for gamers. There's play to win games where you play a video game because you want to win. But with these games, that you mentioned, like Axie Infinity and many other crypto games, it's play to earn money. So it's not me. It's not people that love video games that are signing up for this. It's people who want money. So it's a completely different demographic that are now engaging with this technology. That it's not typical gamers. They're programmers. They're people who understand crypto, who understand trade, who understand stocks. So it's a very different demographic that's engaging with these tools, and we need to understand and work with the private sector and work with DeFi platforms to really understand how we can address this issue, because crypto has been siloed for so long. I think the US government is now creating many different interagency initiatives to understand. They're very, very, very late to the game, especially compared to other countries that have already been adopting crypto into their kind of general understanding of new economies and of cybercrime. But we're definitely on the right path. But I think right now it's pretty difficult for us to crack down on something that we still don't understand. So I think it would be great for agencies to kind of have their own 101 understanding of crypto and cyber in general.
Those are get solid words, Jason. I think maybe for us to end on, because it sounds like from what you're saying, everyone needs to continue to follow the crypto and follow cryptocurrencies, follow digital assets, just follow the space. Obviously, North Korea is following it. So as was said earlier, right, none of this is going away. We've hit our markets 30 minutes after. I would like to thank Eric, Jason, Nick, and Duyon for being with us here for this great conversation. Thank you to the audience, and have a wonderful rest of your day. Bye-bye.